Do we know?
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Well, welcome to our second Open Innovation 2.0 conference, and really delighted to this fantastic venue. We're going to have a very exciting day. We had a wonderful evening last night for those of you that were at the Dublin City Hall, where we had the second edition of the annual Innovation Luminary Awards, and we were celebrating actually some innovators that are in the room with us and some global entrepreneurs. I think, Bror, it certainly was a wonderful evening.
Yes, and if I look at the setting, having traditions over there and this modern, I would say, facility we are now in, that really shows the whole span what open innovation should cover.
Yeah, so I think it's great to see so many old friends and then some new friends, and welcome Mark Ferguson from Science Foundation Ireland. Great to see you here, Mark. Stefan Shepherd has just come in. With lots of very influential and great people. So we're going to work hard today. Our biggest challenge is going to be time. We are output oriented. We've tried to condense our talks into very short, snappy sort of TED type formats, and Bror and I are going to have to role model. What we'd like to do at the start of this session is to try and sort of catch up. What did we cover last year? What was the output? What's happened since then? And set the scene. We have a very exciting panel to kick off our day. Delighted to have one of our innovation luminaries, Richard Straub, will be kicking us off as we go into this session. We have an excellent video from Henry Chesbrough, father of open innovation, talking about the evolution of open innovation and how it's evolving into the new paradigm, Open Innovation 2.0. One of the stars of last year's conference, Dan Marone, is back with us, written an excellent book on crowdfunding, and he will be talking to us. And we hope also to have Kel Ryan join us. Kel is one of the founders of Ryanair, received the award last night, and we talked, and we hope that he'll join us on our panel. And then finally, we have a strong message from Robert Madeline, Director General of DG Connect, who will close the session. So there'll be some opportunity for discussion. You see sort of the rest of the day. It'll all pan out. I won't take the time to actually walk through the agenda. Plenty of times for question. We won't be going through the bios. I think they're very comprehensive. Before we start officially, I want to just thank the whole conference team, David Fleming, the conference director, Annie Honka from the European Commission. Annie's here. The team from Pluto have done an outstanding job. Blindlight Communications Dublin City Council, the Convention Centre team, and I've probably forgotten a lot of people, but please give them a big round of applause before we start. Bror, anything else before we go into the slide fest?
Well, in the spirit of quadruple helix, remember, there are the three traditional ones, but then there is also the people. So you make the conference. It's your interaction, your mingling, your openness for innovation which counts at the end. Welcome.
Great. Okay, so Bror and I have exactly 19 minutes and 28 seconds to recap on what we talked about last year, what's changed, and where are we going. We thought about our theme, sort of change, collaborate, co-create. Change is very important. It's coming. We can either let it happen to us, or we can anticipate it and shape it. Thinking about collaboration and how we might be able to co-create the future. One of my favorite quotes, John Cage, can't understand why people are scared of new ideas. I'm scared of the old ones. And we look back in history, lots of bad ideas that were pervasive for a long time before they eventually decayed. And we're all about the new, not new for newness sake, but trying to figure out a better future. There are two views of the future you can take. Niels Bohr famously said, prediction is difficult, especially about the future. Or the other one from Alan Kay, the best way to predict the future is to invent it, or the best way to predict the future is to innovate it. And I think this community is very much sort of, in the latter. Last year, we came together and said, well, actually, we're going to try and take responsibility. We know we can't exactly predict the future, but we can anticipate it, and we can proactively shape it, and maybe actually through serendipity, and we'll hear more about that later, we can actually create this better future, that's in a sort of, much more efficient and effective way, in a way that's faster. Last year we had President Barroso, we had 3 commissioners, we had a lot of coming together, and we got some serious traction. The output was the Dublin Innovation Declaration, and within a week and a half of the close of the conference, Bror and I were at the Commission with Barroso's senior advisory team, figuring out how could we change the innovation policy of the Commission. Peter Druhl, one of Bror's counterparts in DG Research, we invited him to come to talk at the Intel Research Conference in Nice last year, and he talked about, it's very funny to hear him talk in public about his reaction, because like any organization, there is sort of politics between DG Research and DG Connect, same within different departments, and he shared, first when he heard about Dublin Innovation Declaration, his first reaction was dismissal, oh, so what? Then he said, gosh, maybe there's something real, but I'm going to deny it, denial. And then eventually he said, you know what, I'm going to accept that this is real and it's changing. And what we've seen actually, some of the instruments of Horizon 2020 have been shaped through our input in Open Innovation 2.0. We're not responsible for everything, but it is, our influence is being felt. And for example, the Smart Cities Lighthouse call, this is something where actually the focus is not on idea creation, but it's on wide-scale deployments. We talked last year about the importance of adoption. This is something actually Michaela Magas will talk about later on. Innovation is all about adoption. So I think in the progress we've made last year, the paradigm has started to be accepted. We've actually, real practical examples of it at work, and some of the instruments in Europe and the national levels are adopting it. I'm really pleased Stefan Scheppers is here, who's leading the high-level panel that will report out to the Council of Europe later this year. And at the kickoff meeting here in Dublin, I think we collectively agreed that the Dublin Innovation Declaration would be a very useful wireframe for a report out to the Council of Europe. So more on that later. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the what. We want to get to sustainable, intelligent living. We want to look at financial, social, and environmental sustainability. And the methodology that we're proposing is our paradigm, Open Innovation 2.0. And the core of this is that, the challenges we face are too broad, too difficult to be faced on our own, but by working together, we can overcome them. And it's not just about problems, it's the opportunities, because there are great opportunities ahead. Now, innovation really matters. I used this last year, but it's so stark, so important, the statistic I wanted to put up again. Since World War II, 75% of US GDP growth has come from technological innovation. Quite staggering. So if we are move forward, technological innovation will be hugely important. But as we highlighted last night, it's not just about technological innovation, and we were delighted that Bill Drayton was one of our honorees from Ashoka. So the work that's being done around social innovation is hugely important. So using business practices to change our world for the better. Now, culture is also hugely important, and I love this quote from Drucker: culture eats strategy for breakfast every day. So you can have the best innovation strategy, you can have the best infrastructure, the best funding, but unless the culture is open to innovation, you have a difficulty. And one of the things we were most pleased about last year, we ran a showcase, Future City Showcase at the Mansion House, the Lord Mayor's residence, on what future cities might look like. And we surveyed about 2,000 ordinary Dubliners leaving the exhibition. We asked them two questions. A, do they think Dublin should be used as a site for experimental technologies? And B, if so, would they like to participate in the experiment? We were staggered, instead of getting 10, 12, 14% of people saying yes to those questions, and this was from school children to senior citizens, more than 92% of ordinary Dubliners, 2,000 people, said yes to both of those. So we see there is an appetite for people to engage the innovation process and change. And I like this quote from President Obama last year's State of the Union speech. He said, and I think it reflects the American culture, innovation doesn't just change our lives, it's how we make a living. Now, America doesn't do everything right, and Europe doesn't do everything wrong. But I think this was a very nice sort of encapsulation of a piece of American culture. And I think we need to look at our culture so that we're much more open to innovation. We were very pleased with the response from Dubliners last year. So introducing Open Innovation 2.0, as I said last year, we haven't made this up. We've been working together at Bror with a set of academics and industrialists, and we've published 10 substantive reports on the state of what's going on with open innovation practice. And within a couple of weeks, the 2014 Open Innovation 2.0 yearbook will be available, and we have more case studies, more research, more evolution of this new paradigm, so look out for that. There are a lot of technology catalysts for change. Bain Consulting talk about what they call digitalization, so the digital world and the physical world coming together. We have the cloud, we have big data, we have mobile and social, we have the Internet of Things, and all of these are coming together actually to form a perfect storm. So we've had Moore's Law playing out, but we're actually starting to see sort of, a new exponential happen that's actually creating a massive opportunity for disruption. And, we argued last year, and we think this is very real, that there is this new milieu, this new paradigm, this new melting pot, where we're starting innovation, or universities are starting to open up, and instead of having closed, very rigid innovation chains, they're starting to get leaky and starting to really want to interact more deeply with business. The red and green dots represent individuals. As we move forward, these red dots will become green as more and more individuals participate in the innovation process. John Breslin's going to talk to us later on today about the EURAP project, which has been studying the European app economy. The growth is staggering. And actually looking at the growth projections, there's going to be many, many more people involved in this entrepreneurial process. If you think of the app industry, didn't exist 5 or 6 years ago, now 20, 30, 40 billion dollars and euros. One of the key things we talked about last year was we had seen these, we don't know enough to encapsulate and talk about, fully describe this new paradigm, but we were seeing these weak signals become strong signals. We've seen, the new DNA or the anatomy of Open Innovation 2.0. There were at least 20 clear characteristics or signals we could see, starting from shared vision and value, looking at quadruple helix innovation, the idea that ecosystem innovation is coming to the fore. We could actually purposely build these and orchestrate them. The idea of co-creation, user-driven innovation. And I'll go on, and Bror will talk about some of these, but I want to give us a couple of examples of how these are coming together. Vision is hugely important. We talked about this last year. What Kennedy, this is probably the best example of a vision. And of course, all of the US got behind this. And the famous story is the janitor at one of the NASA facilities was asked, well, what's your job? And he responded, well, I'm putting a man on the moon. I think that's, tells the story of a powerful vision. Shared value, Michael Porter has been writing about this, the idea that we can reconceive the intersection between corporate performance and society and find win-win outcomes, solve big problems and be profitable. And when Kel Ryan comes along, we'll talk about Ryanair and actually some of the principles. When you look at Ryanair, a very successful business, they actually came out of a vision of the founder, Tony Ryan, of articulating shared value, not just building a new carrier that was going to change the world, but actually creating new jobs, lots of jobs, and actually stimulating tourism into the island of Ireland and elsewhere. Some corporations like our own are actually trying to live up to these principles. Our vision is that this decade will not only create and extend computing technology, but will connect and enrich the lives of everybody on the planet. So this is an example of shared vision and also trying to articulate the shared value. So a slide that Broer produced originally to recognize that innovation is moving out of the lab. It's no longer the person in the white coat at an IBM lab or a Bell lab. Henry Chesper wrote the book in 2003 on open innovation, which is about individual companies exploiting ideas that are outside, and Procter & Gamble are the poster child of this with their connect and develop strategy. And today, more than 50% of their new product ideas emanate from outside the company. But the reality is we're here today where we have competing ecosystems. So it's no longer how good your company is, how good your university is, how good your city is, or how good your country is, but the ecosystem that you're part of. Is it a winning ecosystem? And mobile phones are a great example of that. Apple versus Google versus Nokia. The winning ecosystems are the ones that win out. At Intel Labs Europe, we have a network of European labs, 45 labs, 4,500 people. And that's a lot of people, a lot of responsibility, but actually it's really powerful when you combine it in an ecosystem. So we've worked in Europe to build an ecosystem of more than 700 partners where we actually have a shared vision, and we're able to amplify all our results here. We're able to accelerate, we're able to lower risk, and we get real alignment. But what we've seen since last year, really actually much more coming to the fore, these new innovation ecosystems that didn't exist 2 or 3 years ago. And here's an example. If you think of Burton Shaw's and Hanson's innovation value chain, going from designing to prototyping to funding to manufacturing and selling, there's a new ecosystem that didn't exist 2 years ago. I know Dan's going to talk a lot about sort of Kickstarter and Indiegogo and so on. One of the contributions that Intel we've made as a company is investing in the Quark processor, which is the first Intel processor we've ever designed in Ireland, and we created the Galileo board. And combined with some other solutions like Raspberry Pi, we're seeing this whole new maker community actually sprout and grow. And another example, announcement just a couple of weeks ago from Radio Shack in the US, and also PCH International, which happens to actually be an Irish company, Liam Casey, trying to create a whole new value chain for entrepreneurs. So Radio Shack using some of their components, lowering the barriers. PCH International will actually manufacture the components, and then Radio Shack across their 2,000 stores will actually guarantee high-profile retail space for the entrepreneurs. And this is, I think, a really good example of these new innovation value chains cropping up. Paul Duggan's going to be talking to us later on. In fact, here actually we have a stakeholder meeting running in parallel of Tech Shop, and Paul will be talking this afternoon around actually the arrival of Tech Shop to Ireland. So new value change cropping up. Dan will talk about crowdsourcing. At the ISPRIM conference earlier this week, I learned about actually Foresight crowdsourcing, an initiative called Future Agenda, which was funded by Vodafone. 300,000 people actually contributed to a Foresight exercise that has been very informative and used by companies and governments all around the world. We'll come to the quadruple helix. This is something that is at the core of what we think about Open Innovation 2.0, government, industry, academia, and citizens working together to drive solutions to problems that are bigger than we can solve on our own. We've been doing this in Dublin. So this isn't just theory. The Lord Mayor, the Innovation Minister, VP for Research from Trinity College, ourselves, a new vision of what the city might look like. We've done it in London, a collaborative institute with UCL, Imperial, with the support of the government. We have Mark Kleinman from GLA. Will be giving a keynote later this morning talking about the Smart London plan. We talked last night, Veli Pekka, Richard have been at the forefront of the Living Labs movement. And how does quadruple helix with the Living Labs idea coming together with user involvement? Jean-Claude Bergelman has been talking about the role of the user moving from somebody who's a part of the study, it's a participant, and now an active part of the innovation process. Ghislaine Meyer, his famous report talked about the reverse innovation pyramid, how the users, instead of innovation happening to users, they're part of the innovation process. We've talked about the entrepreneurial university. Brian McRae, president of Dublin City University, will be talking about actually how his university is shifting, not just from doing teaching, not just from doing research. It's about wealth creation. We Professor Ramaswamy last year talked about the 3 W's, wealth, well-being, and welfare. And how does this become real? Just some real practical examples. At Intel, we've been working with the City of London. I'm going to give one example in Brixton. I wanted to highlight in real time, we have a project in San Jose, a project that emanated here in Dublin, but because of the ecosystem, the relationship with San Jose, we've now deployed a solution in San Jose, and one of my team was at the White House yesterday, where our air quality solution that we've deployed, developed in Dublin, deployed in San Jose, was highlighted as one of only 5 Smart America Lighthouse projects by the US President and the US Federal CTO. In Dublin, we've been working very closely with the city, involving citizens and business people actually to design new applications, one in particular called City Watch, which is about transforming the city. And we're delighted just to report the progress. In the collaboration, the Lord Mayor had established actually a new ecosystem of business people, of academics that meet every 6 weeks to try and figure out a better future for Dublin. And fast forward, about 6 weeks ago, we were able to have the Intel president here, and we signed a unique agreement with the city manager, with the Lord Mayor, to make Dublin the most sensed city in the world. And we'll be sensing stuff like air quality, like microclimate, like noise pollution, light pollution, and this is a very exciting project moving forward. I just wanted to highlight one project before I hand over to Bror in Brixton, where this quadruple helix is alive and well. Working with Nicky Gavron and Loop Labs, there is a vision that we can solve some big problems at a local level. London has one of the worst air quality problems of any European city. There are also issues around inactivity. Most 20% of people in London don't get any exercise. On average, about people are getting 33% of the recommended amount of exercise. The US or the UK is about to be fined about £300 million by the European Commission because of the air quality problem, but that's only the tip of the iceberg. Increasingly, there's lots of evidence that poor air quality leads to actually much shorter lifespan. So what we've been doing there with Loop Labs, with our institute at UCL Imperial, is trying to design actually an application and a game where students and their parents get involved. One of the frightening statistics I saw was that, in London, you can see it there, 50% of the journeys are under 3 kilometres, and the average speed sometimes in rush hour is 0.18 kilometres per hour in some of the congested paths, and this is leading to actually a major air pollution problem. So very simply, what has happened, real time we're displaying outside the schools actually the air pollution levels. And the students are encouraging their parents, and we're using an application that they help co-design to actually encourage their parents to walk them to school. Here are some of the kids. We actually have a nice video. We might have an opportunity to show it later on, depending on the timing. But there's a very simple flow here. Kids download the app, they recruit adults, the adults pledge the amended behavior. When the adults walk, the kids get milestones and points. The points are aggregated and they get prizes. And we're trying to use this gamification incentivization. Now, I wish I could tell you the results, but this month we're in trial. But we figured out actually where's the shared value for the council, for the citizens, for the students, for academics, for SMEs who have opportunities to build on this. But the whole idea is working at a local level, people level, we can build engaging experiences and solve these problems. The last point I want to make, innovation is about adoption. It's not innovators innovating, it's customers adopting. 80% of the value comes from the adoption according to OECD and just 20% from production. And most of our public funding is all about creating the ideas. But the hard part is really the adoption, and the Lighthouse projects in Horizon 2020 are going to be an important step forward. We learned at the last conference from Dublin that the big areas of return are business model innovation and ecosystem innovation. I don't know if Kel Ryan is with us yet. He'll be on the panel. But Ryanair is a fantastic example of this business model innovation. They took the Southwest model in the US and actually moved it to Europe. And through a combination of courage and consistency and focus on cash, they're now the second largest airline by passenger volume in Europe. They also, at one point they had a larger market cap than BA and Lufthansa combined. So they're a great example. Innovation isn't all about the invention. You just take something and you maybe modify it and copy it and do fast replication. And their share price growth is staggering. They continue to grow, passenger volume. And it's just, innovation doesn't have to be rocket science. It can be simple. It's all about what we call patterns. I want to finish with this one quote from Seneca, Stoic philosopher. He said, the way is long if one follows precepts or rules, but the way is short if one follows patterns. So if you can find a winning pattern and actually replicate it, that's a very fast way to actually innovation and value. So I'm going to hand you over to Bror.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we are in a change. We are all now making the change. I'll skip many of these slides, but I think what is important is really innovation is to make things happen. If you have just an ideation and it doesn't lead to anything, it doesn't meet the need of the customers, well, it's not worth. Another thing what we have noticed very much is really sustainable innovation is full of disruptions. It requires courage. It requires also from the innovation mentality the guts to stick the neck out. And then scale up fast what seems to be successful and kill fast what seems to be less successful. There's quite interesting statistics really showing that those companies who cut earlier failing projects are those who are more successful than the others. So again, courage to cut, courage to fail, but not stopping to try. OI2 is very much really on creating new. We see the paradigm changed very much based on the drivers we see in practical cases. It's about connectivity, it's about openness, it's about strong interaction, and here I would really like to introduce the word organization. Because again, we see more and more combination of competencies driven by tasks to be performed and not by the organizational forms. If you think about fixed organizational forms, they are actually limiting very much on what you can do and what you want to do. So it's really about finding the right competencies. Diversity matters. This was already there in the last year's slides. The more you have diversity in the team, the more you have possibilities for breakthrough innovations. And we are looking for breakthrough innovations. We need those breakthrough innovations. So again, how to capture that wide scope you need. And then, well, when we were starting to talk about internet, we clearly spoke about democratization innovation. That is that internet is somehow equalizing everything. But it's not true. Talent attracts talent. And when we are moving more and more towards intangibles, more and more towards a connected society, you see those spikes emerging. And of course, the challenge for us is how to make our environments spikes, how to make innovation more successful, more probable in those environments which we are creating. We see the same happening in business structures as well. You combine competencies based on what you are doing. I wouldn't speak about value networks or value chains anymore. It's really about value constellations, where actually take the analogy of stellar constellations. You see the constellations based on who you are and where you are. So you are really moving the innovation perspective from the organizational driven to the user driven. And here again, I would really like to say that from European perspective, one of our best assets are the most advanced and demanding users, be it user industry or the citizens. And from that, clearly, the thinking of quadruple helix is coming into the OI2. What is also important is that it's not anymore enough to look at from organizational perspective the traditional revenue generation, cost saving. Of course, that needs to be okay, but really the value of the entity, organization, depends on its relations to outside and its openness for change. Again, speaking very much for the ecosystem thinking. When looking at that from open innovation perspective and the Chessborough 2003 model perspective, one can really question is that kind of a leaking funnel enough? We claim that it's not enough. We need to look at areas in between, and we need to get more and more actually serendipity into the innovation process. We cannot base our hypothesis on linear innovation models, not even those leaking funnels. We need to do more. And of course, what to do, where to do more, then we probably are moving to something which is to be done in real world settings, because again, doing those experiments in real world settings, you are actually creating a safety net. What can be done, what should be done, and how it should be done. Well, this is a very, very nice slide from Richard originally, on the sources of external and internal knowledge. And what is really remarkable when we are looking at from the ideation perspective and also innovation perspective, where the ideas come from. Not from the formal organizations, not from the persons in their formal roles. It's really about competence nodes networking. One stream leading to the Open Innovation 2.0 was actually the thinking of virtual enterprises, holodeck enterprises, etc. in the late 90s. How to combine competencies, how to transfer them in different configurations when the tasks are developing, and how you transfer the leadership. Very, very important when we are looking at open innovation. And here again, one of the new elements we think are extremely important is the Creative Commons, the societal capital, which was not involved embedded in the first generation of open innovation thinking. When looking at that ecosystem perspective, it's really clear that ecosystem thinking, quadruple helix thinking, in-between thinking between the existing entities, organizations is becoming increasingly important. I'll skip that. But really what I would like to conclude with is that the paradigm change is real. When you look at the different dimensions, different axes, well, I don't even try to draw a 8-9 dimensional space in there, but you can clearly see that we are moving from, for instance, clusters to ecosystems. We're seeking something in between. We are moving from independency to interdependency. Again, looking at something in between. We are moving from triple helix innovation models to quadruple, looking at how we can actually, with the fourth component, create a new win-win game. How we can create actually new markets based on operating in between. And also how to not only think out of the box, but think without boxes. That is the interdisciplinary, inter-organizationally needed thinking. Again, in between. So actually is the challenge for OI2 now to push for the in-between thinking, to get very fast, growing very fast dynamics. It's you who can give the answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Bor.
Now it's yours.
So we'll actually we'll get moving along swiftly, and our first invited speaker is Richard Straub. You'll see his bio, very eminent person. We're also joined by Cal Ryan. Welcome, Cal. So Richard is going to talk to us about management and innovation. So please give a warm welcome to Richard.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here. I couldn't make it last year. Last moment flew, but I'm even more happy to be able now to join this great effort. And I had the privilege yesterday already to be at the gala dinner, and it's really, for somebody who has been involved in the forming of this Open Innovation Group, I mean, I'm one of the founders, and I'm really extremely impressed what has come out of it. And I think the credit goes to Martin and the credit goes to Brouwer, and I think it gets an enormous dynamic, which is really very, very impressive. So, you've seen what title I've chosen. I mean, I'm trying, when I'm making these presentations, two things. I've been with IBM for 32 years. I've used all the time PowerPoints. So you will be surprised, I almost use no PowerPoints, number one. Number two, I don't feel I succeed in having a presentation if I don't create at least one major cognitive dissonance in the audience, right? So let's see. We can measure it. We can measure it later. But that are some of the objectives. besides the content-related objectives I have in mind. Now, when I say addressing the innovation crisis, who would agree that there is an innovation crisis at all? Aren't we in the age of great innovation? So raise your hands if you agree, but don't just do it because if you are really convinced. Who thinks we have an innovation crisis in all this time with wonderful things happening? So I try to see, well, there's still a few, because otherwise I would have asked the question, maybe I choose the wrong theme, right? But I have some support already. I'll try to convince the others that in fact there is something you might call innovation crisis. Now, I will not start talking about open innovation. I've been, as I said, involved all along, going back to the Hippel ideas, right, on user-driven innovation, forward to the new ideas of Henry Chesborough and so on. I would like to place open innovation again in the context of the overall issue of innovation. Open innovation doesn't stand by itself, right? It's part of a large spectrum in the context of a broader innovation system or innovation activities in companies or in economy. Open innovation as such is one of the great, what I would call one of the great management innovations that came up during the last years, right? It's a way how you look at innovation, how you manage innovation, but it's part of innovation. So I don't look at it in isolation. This is why I would also like to make this bigger, to place it in this bigger context of the innovation crisis, which I couldn't make just for open innovation alone. When we talk about innovation, we are really at the heart of the functioning of the economic system. And you might say of capitalism itself. Because the innovation capacity determines the ability for the economy and for society to regenerate itself, which is vital. If we cannot regenerate, the only alternative is decay. So I don't need to mention Schumpeter, but Schumpeter was very much on this subject. He said, really in the center of the capitalist and of the market society is, of course, the entrepreneur. And the term of creative destructions is today pervasively used. One of the issues may be that destruction has a bit of a negative implication. So maybe we could find some new ways to call it creative regeneration. It's really about regeneration and not maybe so much about destruction. So Schumpeter, since we have a friend at The Economist, Adrian Woodridge, who is writing the Schumpeter column, maybe we can win him over to talk about creative regeneration in the future. So, what is this regeneration all about? It's about human needs, it's about new opportunities, it's about activity, it's about involving humans by giving them meaningful tasks, jobs, however you may call it, a purpose, right? So it's not only a business imperative, it is a business imperative, of course, but not only, but it's an imperative for society. Our future and the future of the coming generations is at stake when we talk about innovation. So I like to place it not as an economic debate and not just a debate of business interest, but it's a debate about society and it's a debate about our future. Innovation should and can give us the solutions for the new challenges we are facing. And we have enough challenges. I don't want to repeat the whole list, but just think about some of the very big challenges. Unemployment, youth unemployment. When we talk about a purposeful life, what do you do with youth unemployment? So it's a terrible problem. The whole issue that we see our economy coming to a point where more and more people talking about the danger of a secular stagnation, which has tremendous impact on all other things like employment. I mean, Larry Summers used this term even recently. the state, where has the state moved? Where has it evolved? It has overstretched itself. It has a huge issue in efficiency, in effectiveness. The demographics, especially in the developed countries, are a new type of challenge, which has, of course, great opportunities when we come to innovation. And so on. I could go on for a long list. I think the key question is this something we are just subject to? We are the victims in a way, and these are like huge external waves where nobody can do much about it, and we just need to see, to find ways to survive? Or is it something where significant components are man-made and also solutions to these bigger challenges can be man-made? So I would like to come at this point to one of the greatest management thinkers of our time currently. I would consider him, when I think about Peter Drucker, I would consider Clay Christensen coming very close to a let's say, towering personality like Peter Drucker. So Clay Christensen is well known for everybody who deals with innovation, so I'm sure it tells you something. And Clay Christensen has published an article just recently in Harvard Business Review. Who has seen the article, The Capitalist's Dilemma? So if you have not, good, so I'm always happy I can tell you something new. Okay, so but I will recommend to read the article. It's really a great piece. So Clay Christensen has exactly looked at this issue and has said, what about management? Is it economics? Is it the abstractions of economics? Or is it real people? Is it management? Is it in the sphere of how we manage companies and what the rules are for managing companies? And here's what his conclusions are, what he shows in his article. He talks about three types of, and I will make it very short, so I cannot try to sort of bring it all to you like this. So he talks about three types of innovation. He says there is innovation which he would call sustaining, which is more or less keeping things going. A new car model, for example, right? Which addresses a similar clientele, but you can keep your market share, maybe slightly increase it, but it doesn't change fundamentally things. So that means it keeps the jobs also in place that you have in a given economy. That's sustaining innovation. Then he talks about efficiency innovation. And I think that everybody is well aware what it means, especially in the light of technology. We see more and more efficiency innovation. Efficiency innovation is where most people say, well, we do more with less, right? The issue that people feel more and more often is that it's also less jobs. So efficiency innovation, of course, is necessary to be competitive, but it has the danger of reducing employment, reducing jobs. And then he talks about empowering innovation, about innovation creating new markets. And I realized with great interest that Clay has changed his terminology a bit. He didn't talk so much about disruptive innovation, which is also a term which has not only positive connotations. And when I say Clay Christensen, he is one of the great speakers we will have in Vienna, by the way, in the Drucker Forum. I think I'm allowed to do this type of short ad, but we will have the discussion with him directly, so he has been kind enough to join us in November in Vienna. So he's talking about this empowering market creating innovation. And what he's saying essentially is that currently companies are putting much more focus on efficiency innovation than on empowering innovation. And even though that efficiency innovation liberates capital, because when you are better in the supply chain, when you are better in your whole management of your stock, of merchandise, of course you free up capital. What do you do with the capital? You reinvest it in efficiency innovation. And what does this do to your company? You get very efficient, but you have less and less jobs, unless you put money also into empowering innovation, in creating new markets. The issue is, this has much higher risks than efficiency innovation. Efficiency innovations, the boards love it, the shareholders get their quarterly dividends and are happy. The empowering innovation, market-creating innovation, is longer term, has more risks, and doesn't show so well in the short-term financial measurements. Now, what is the situation in corporations today? And when I say in corporations, there are, of course, exceptions, but I talk about patterns. And I think Martin mentioned this point about patterns. Corporations sit on two piles. You know what these two piles are? Two piles. Guess, one pile is money, cash. Cash pile of more than 2 trillion. More than 2 trillion. Enormous cash pile. But there's a second pile which is not so well known by many, but it's real. Yeah, does anybody know which pile? It's a debt pile, because they took on a lot of debt. They took on debt, and it's overall in the range of 9 trillion. 9 trillion worldwide. These are real numbers. Why did they take on this debt? Why do they have the cash pile? To invest it in innovation, to invest it in empowering market-creating innovation? I'm afraid not. What are they doing with it, mainly? And the corporate representatives, okay, their corporations is always excluded, so I'm talking about the others, right? So I'm coming from a corporation, you know that. I was with IBM for 32 years. But what are they doing with it, mainly? Apart from investing, of course. They are buying back stock, share, right? Share buyback is the huge program in almost all major corporations to keep the share price up, to move it up. So we have a problem there. We have a problem. There's a problem, of course, in the whole system, which goes much deeper than, specific measures. It's a systemic problem. It's the tyranny of the market. It's short-termism, which is something which we cannot just wish away. It's there, but it's deeply in the system. When people like Dominic Barton from McKinsey write a second article in Harvard Business Review, I think it was in December, about short-termism and the terrible consequences it has, he knows what he's talking about. And especially, he knows what he's talking about when he says, it's not getting better, it's getting worse. So we have a problem. Yeah, we have a real problem. And it translates in many ways. It translates also in the way how people feel in companies. It's the question, how can it be that according to the Gallup research, worldwide survey, workplace survey, only 13% of the population working in companies these days are fully engaged. They give more than they are expected to give, only 13%. There is something badly wrong. So what I would like to connect with this is the point about we have to confront reality. Whenever we talk about really good and great things that are happening, let's keep in mind the big picture. And I would like to see this point about innovation crisis, which I firmly believe we have. We are not growing. Martin made the point about growth. Innovation is about growth, right? If we don't innovate, we won't achieve growth. So it's a huge crisis if we don't change things as they are currently moving. So I want to see that as a wake-up call and as a call for reconsidering priorities. And that's very strong at the European level, at the policy level of the member states, but also for the individual companies, as we just saw, and for the elites, for the leadership elites. And we have these elites, and they fail us. So there is something to think about. Without trying to trace all the different measures that could be taken, I just wanted to highlight a few directions which we are talking about, but which must be taken more seriously. And the European Commission is represented here, and I want to be rather not politically correct. And I'm saying, if the European Commission talks about entrepreneurship, there is talk, but there is by far not enough action. If you look, for example, at the field of entrepreneurship. If the European Commission talks about innovation, it's great and it's good, and there are things moving, But our legacy is research and development. And most of the funding is going in this field and not in the area of how do we translate this into value. And this is where we need more and more focus if we want to address this innovation crisis. So we are in a world today where people are connected, where people are, let's say, interrelating in a completely new way, where we can see the creativity which is emerging from all these great connections and linkages. So it's a question of how can we liberate all this great energy, which is to some degree buried in organizations. It's really virtually buried in organizations, and it cannot come to the surface because also the way we organize or we manage organization is far from good. Yeah, it's far from good. We need to make fundamental changes. If we succeed only to get some of this creativity and motivation out at the surface, we would have a completely different picture for innovation. And technology, of course, is a great game changer. And this is the last point I would like to make. I think technology gives a lot of hope, but there is also a lot of concern around technology. And the concern lies in the way how we, human beings, look at technology. We have become, in our arguments, in our way of speaking and thinking about technology, almost totally technology-centric. Everything is coming through, it's now big data. And I'm not against big data, it's great, but that's not the solution of the world's problem. It's human beings. It's the question, how do you use technology to enhance what a human being is? Not trying to go into transhumanism as some of the Silicon Valley gurus do and tell us about singularity, that there will only be machines telling us in the future what to do. I mean, this is nonsense. We are human beings. It's about us. It's about how technology can support us, how we can combine the human spirit with the force of technology. And I think that's something we have to change, and we have to at least to rethink. And there are many ways to do that. And open innovation, this idea of bringing people together, of connecting people, of having new processes which are in a way democratic, which are open, which involve, which include others, have open spaces as they are coming up more and more, where different disciplines are coming together. By the way, Vienna already 100 years ago had great open spaces for innovation. You know what they were in Vienna? The coffee house, because you had all different disciplines coming together, and the salon. But now we have it worldwide. We have the worldwide coffee house and we have the worldwide salon. So we can do a lot to improve the situation and to find new ways, and I think open innovation has a lot to contribute and to show the way how we can achieve this liberation of energy, this liberation of creativity that we need so badly, and not stick with symptom cures as we currently do too much. So this is the ad that I'm allowed to do. This will be further discussed in the Drucker Forum. It's a non-profit, so this is why I can advertise it. Nobody makes money on this. We try to fund it, of course. Great transformation, and this takes the point. We have reached a point. Either we transform for the good, or we go into a dangerous situation of decline. I think that's really the seriousness. And here you see a few of the friends who will be speaking, and of course, Clay Christensen and Pankaj Kemawat and Gary Hamel, and Harvard Business Review is deeply involved with Adi Ignatius, with its editor-in-chief, or from Asia. We have Vineet Nayar, who is one of the great management thinkers, and so on. Martin Wolf, the economist. So we want the economists and the management thinkers to come together. And here are two final quotes. I have to end with Drucker. He said, it's managers and management who are the central resource, and they are decisive for society, and it makes a difference. It's sort of a life-giving force, and what managers do is of public interest, obviously. And the other point is, much will depend in the 21st century on our progress in non-technological innovation, with deep changes in how companies operate and how society functions. So that was what I tried to talk about. We're talking about people supported by technology, but it's really people. It's the people who make the difference. So, thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to a very exciting day.
Great. Thanks, Richard, and congratulations again on the Innovation Luminary Award. And we can certainly recommend the Drucker Forum. It's certainly probably at least the second leading thought leadership forum in Europe. Our next speaker is Professor Henry Chesbrough, who actually was also an Innovation Luminary, received it last night, and congratulations to Henry. Henry was really keen to be here. He had his daughter's graduation yesterday, and we did actually explore. He was keen. Could we move the date of the conference? It wasn't possible. So we have Henry on video. So let's run the video, please.
Hello, this is Henry Chesbrough talking to you, wearing a nice California shirt, trying to bring some California sunshine to the Innovation 2.0 conference in Dublin, Ireland. I'm sorry I can't be there with you in person, but I was delighted to accept the invitation from Martin and Bror to discuss with you a little bit of a history and a possible future of open innovation. Open innovation really began back in April of 2003 when my book from that name first came out. At that time, I did a Google search on the term open innovation and got back about 200 page links. And these all had the property of the word open and the word innovation appearing in the same sentence. But there was no particular meaning to the two words together. 10 years later, I did the same search using the same search term on the same search engine, and I got back more than 453 million links. And although I didn't look at all of them, the first few pages of links were all about a new model of industrial innovation. Now, obviously, anything that expands that much, that quickly, goes way beyond any one person. But I can truly say that I was part of the creation of this activity, and your exciting conference continues that today. It's also worth thinking about what open innovation contributes relative to earlier theories of innovation, because it really is, I think, a different approach. One is that the assumption is that useful knowledge is abundant, not scarce, and that what we get from outside is as important as what we generate inside. We used to think in economic terms about spillovers, and they were essentially a cost of doing business. But under open innovation, these spillovers can be channeled, directed, and managed, whether outside in or from the inside out. The business model is also an important construct because it's the business model that helps you figure out what to search for from the outside and what to let go to the outside. In evaluating projects for your business model, you're also going to have both false positive and false negative evaluation errors. Companies think about the false positive errors where a project gets carefully reviewed, introduced to the market, and then fails. But companies often don't think hard about potential false negative evaluation errors, where a project gets stopped at some level of its development and is not allowed to continue. In my research on Xerox and its spin-offs, I found that some of these abandoned projects went outside to the venture capital community and turned into public companies that were worth a lot of money. So false negatives are important as well. This means we've also got to think about intellectual property, whether we're bringing ideas in from the outside or letting ideas from inside go to the outside. There are also a whole range of intermediaries and crowdsourcing options that have emerged in the last 10 years to help us scout for new ideas and new technology. And lastly, we're going to need new metrics to assess innovation performance in open innovation. So the outside-in part of open innovation helps us strengthen the business and the business model we already have. This is, I think, the most commonly practiced and the most commonly studied aspect of open innovation. But there's a second very important aspect as well. That is the inside-out process. And this is where you can explore new potential businesses and new potential business models. And this is the second half of open innovation that is not as practiced as much, nor is it researched as much. There's also a problem with different definitions of what we mean by open innovation. One of my colleagues at MIT, Eric von Hippel, has been talking about open collaborative innovation, which he defines as the production of public goods. That's not the same definition as what I've used in my work on open innovation, which is about both the purposive inflows and outflows of knowledge for both internal innovation and external use of innovation. So it's important to realize what we're talking about when we say open innovation. Another contrast is that in the von Hippel explanation, he focuses on the role of users, who are the source of many innovations and who benefit directly from these innovations by sharing them freely and openly with others. And in his construct, we don't need a business model. In open innovation, as I define it, ideas can come from anywhere. Yes, users, but also many other places like universities, startups, etc. And these ideas are going to need to attract capital to get to scale, and the suppliers of this capital are going to need some return, which means at some point to get to scale and really impact the economy and the society, we're going to need a business model. Some work at Imperial College in London has tried to bring these two perspectives closer together by pointing out that both the inbound and outbound flows of knowledge can be done for both pecuniary and non-pecuniary reasons. And so this broader matrix could be thought of as a richer description of open innovation. I also thought, in light of the conference that you're at today, it would be worth sharing with you some of the research from the only large-scale survey I'm aware of on the use of open innovation in large companies. This is research I did with the Fraunhofer Institute and their researcher there, Dr. Sabine Brunswicker. Sabine is now a professor of engineering at Purdue University. And we looked at companies with sales of more than $250 million annually that had more than 1,000 employees. And we went out to the field from October to December of 2012 and got about 125 responses. We surveyed 5 different areas: the extent of the use of open innovation, whether it had been abandoned, what the years of experience with open innovation have been, the support by management for open innovation, and how intensively it was being used. In brief, here's what we found. 78% of the large firms that we sampled said they were practicing open innovation. None of the firms that we surveyed reported abandoning it at this point. On average, firms had been using open innovation about 5 years. 71% of the respondents report that management support is increasing, and 82% say that they are practicing open innovation more intensively than they were 3 years earlier. Here's some additional findings. That 78% of firms practicing covers a range of industries, from a low of 40% of the firms in low-tech manufacturing to 85 or even 90% in wholesale trade and retail and high-tech manufacturing. We also asked about budgets and staffing for open innovation, and in our survey we found the average firm is spending around $2 million annually with about 10 full-time equivalents working on open innovation. We also asked about objectives for open innovation, ranging from new partnerships and technologies to reducing costs of R&D or managing the risks of innovation. And here's what they told us. The most important and relevant reasons for open innovation had to do with new partnerships and new technological trends, along with new business opportunities. The R&D costs per project, by contrast, were actually not very important to the respondents. And then we asked about the biggest challenges that these companies face. The biggest ones, interestingly, are meeting the organizational changes internally to make open innovation effective in the organization. So yes, there's a lot of information to access from outside in doing open innovation. The biggest challenges, though, are managing internal activities. Also, you have to think about external relationships and know-how. There's actually less concern about external or already existing internal knowledge. The last area I wanted to share with you is around the metrics that companies are using for open innovation and how satisfied they are with those metrics. In brief, they're not all that satisfied with these measures. Some of them, like the share of external innovation contributions in R&D projects, are modestly satisfactory, but many of them are actually below the indifference point of 4 on a scale from 1 to 7. So you can interpret this as saying that people in general are not very satisfied with the metrics that they're using. I think the important point here is that although open innovation is widely practiced in large firms and appears to be growing in its intensity and management support, the actual metrics currently being used are not viewed all that well, which suggests there's a lot of room for further improvement here. Where might this take open innovation in the future? Well, in the beginning, open innovation was really dealing with fairly tactical questions like accessing an external technology from scouting or from crowdsourcing. Today, it really, I think, has evolved to a different mindset for how we think about and organize our innovation activity. In the beginning, we had a few stories from a few companies about what they were doing. But now we're starting to see some larger scale survey data like I just shared with you, and we're beginning to define the boundary conditions for success or failure and the management actions that can improve those chances. In the beginning, we were also focused almost exclusively on for-profit organizations. We're now seeing open innovation in both the nonprofit sector and in the public sector as well. And there are even books coming out now about creating more public policies that are supportive of open innovation. And lastly, and very important for this conference, moving from dyadic relationships from one organization to another to entire communities and ecosystems of innovation. So this was a chart I stole from Martin's presentation last year about open innovation, the Open Innovation 2.0 version. And what I like about this is how it builds from firms to users and startups and universities and government support and the general ecosystem surrounding innovation activities. If you think about some of the outputs of the organization since last year's conference, a lot of work has come out not only on open innovation, but open innovation in a variety of different contexts, like services, for example. This mirrors some of my own work, which not only started in 2003 with open innovation, but has gone into academic work with my colleagues Joel West and Wim van Haverbeke at Oxford University, and more recent books on opening business models and open services innovation. And I'm proud to tell you today that we will have another book, also from Oxford University Press, coming out this October called New Frontiers in Open Innovation, that will survey the work that's been done in the 10 years that have happened since the book came out. Thanks very much for your attention, and have a wonderful conference.
So I hope that you are inspired by what you have heard so far. And I can ensure, based on our last year's experience, that we will be even more inspired hearing our friend Dan Marom to speak about crowds in different dimensions. Crowds, crowdsourcing, crowd resourcing, crowd whatever, crowd ideation. So welcome, Dan Marom.
Thank you very much. Hi, thanks much for the kind invitation. I'm grateful for speaking after such giants, and this will help. My name is Dan Marom, and I'm an Israeli researcher. I'm integrating a bit of practice researching, hopefully also contributing to this discussion about crowdfunding, about open innovation, with the notion that crowdfunding may be a missing piece in the debate. So I was very fortunate to be to co-author one of the first books on crowdfunding revolution. This is one of the later editions, and since then I was passionately traveling the globe to speak about it. Last year I had the opportunity to speak in this conference. I was truly inspired and spent a year trying to think how could I contribute not only with the notion of crowdfunding, but the intersection with open innovation. So I want to start with teaching you a word in Hebrew. Maybe some of you are familiar with the word chutzpah or sababa or balagan. There are lots of interesting Israeli words, but it is the word that I would like to teach you this morning. It's called tachles. Tachles is being practical, straight to the point, concrete, no bullshit. And I loved Martin and Bro's presentation. You were speaking about adoption, and he was speaking about making things happen. So that's tachles. And I thought how we could make crowdfunding a tachles movement for open innovation. So I would like to take 15 seconds of your time, if you can, and think about what's your biggest challenges on making open innovation really tachles, really happening. So take 10, 15 seconds and think about your challenges on how to make open innovation a reality in your organization, non-profit, for-profit, or anything else. 10 seconds. I heard that the entrance is free, so I can offer a money-back guarantee if I will not answer some of your dilemmas or challenges. But I was thinking about the biggest challenges, and we saw the great presentations that were previously presented, and Chesbro survey with Fraunhofer. I was thinking about how we can make engagement of all the different parties, how we can become reality, what kind of incentives can we offer, how we can leverage whether it's employees, users, or civil parties in order to make it a reality. And I think that maybe crowdfunding can be a way to do so. A few words about crowdfunding. It's the ability to gather small amounts of funds from a relatively large amount of people that together creates an impact. Well, it's not a very, very modern notion, but technology enabled a very, very quick, by the click of a mouse, a very, very quick transformation of money and knowledge. So nowadays, it's not only donations that you need to walk from door to door, you can do it electronically. And Chesbro quoted von Hippel, so I'll start with another quote. Crowdfunding is an important contributor to the democratization of innovation. And more than that, it's the biggest paradigm shift in innovation since the Industrial Revolution. So I'm grateful that crowdfunding appeared in this year's slides. Maybe next year it will be even more central. So how it's been done, crowdfunding? How we can gather small amounts from large amount of people? We build platforms. A few years ago, who would imagine that we could buy a used car part from a person outside of our country or even in another continent, pay a few dollars, and get it working as promised. So platforms not only create an intermediation, but it also creates trust. So platforms are very useful also in crowdfunding. There are more than 1,000 platforms currently offering entrepreneurs in various places, in various segments, to fundraise from donors, backers, investors, supporters, lenders. I'll soon elaborate on that, via electronic platforms. Any of you have heard about Kickstarter? So Kickstarter is just the tip of an iceberg. It's been done currently, we classified it, and currently it's being used vastly to 4 domains. So people invest small amounts. What do they get? What's the return on investment? So first, it's donation. It's philanthropy on steroids. Second is reward-based. People can pre-purchase a product or a service before it was manufactured. Let's let's imagine that we want to create some kind of an electronic gadget like this one. So we can go to a bank or we can go to a venture capital or angel. Now we have a new playground. We can imagine together with the crowd that what benefits this kind of gadget can bring them. And we can showcase with we'll see tech shop with the 3D printers today. It's quite easy to demonstrate a new product. So we could tell people that if they'll join our journey and fund our dream, it will come true. Kickstarter, in the last 4.5 years, raised more than $1 billion for almost 200,000 entrepreneurs across the world. Just by saying, join our dream, in a few months you will get it. It will cost a bit less than what it will cost later in Amazon or eBay, but more than that. You'll get a piece of our dream. You'll be able to be a part of the entrepreneurial journey. So that's reward-based. Debt. Let's say that Bror and I go to a bank in Dublin together, and we sit and wait for the clerk. Bror wants to deposit some amount, and I would like to get a loan with the same amount. I don't know what's the interest rates in Ireland currently, but in Israel, for example, he will get 1% interest rate on his deposit, and I will get approximately between 10 to 15 interest rate on my loan. We are sitting in the same bank at the same time, waiting for the clerk. Now imagine that we could look at each other and say, let's make a better deal. Why do we need this financial intermediary? Let's meet in the middle. Israelis are very reputable by doing such things. I have additional Israeli words to teach you maybe later today. So this notion of financial disintermediation is happening online. People can upload their loan requests alongside other documents. They will get their rate and they will get the interest by the rate of their secured loan or the risk. And other people can fund them. You could lend me, each of you, $100 so I could buy a new car and I'll repay to you. Consumer loans are a great investment opportunity. And this business that I'm speaking about only in the US is approximately $4 billion yearly. It's a tiny share of the consumer loans market in the US, but it's growing rapidly. UK was one of the leaders with Zopa, Rate Settler, Funding Circle, and today there's a new way for financial players, crowdfunding. And last, let's imagine that we're entrepreneurs and we are speaking mostly about SMEs today, and we want to fund a new dream. So maybe it's not very close to the market, and we can't ship it in 3 to 6 months, so we can't use Kickstarter or any of the hundreds available platforms, and we can't take debt because it's very risky. So today, in several countries, including the UK, people can sell shares in their private companies to the public. Until now, security agencies across the world limited the number of investors in private companies. But this tension between trying to protect small investors against the potential of so many people like us investing in startups, this tension is now solved, and many of the countries are following a new set of rules, like in the US, the new Jobs Act. And currently, in many places across the globe, people can invest in private companies. Obama showed us a milestone, and I think that it's not only raising hundreds of millions of dollars from small donors. It's much more than that. It's understanding that crowdfunding is engagement. It's understanding that a new voter that donated $10 and got a shirt and will walk with the shirt will also tell his family at dinner that he's a part, or he or her are part of the campaign. And most importantly, they will go to vote at the voting day. They feel a part. They voted with the most sensitive part of their body, the wallet. and they feel a part of Obama's journey. And I think it's a brilliant notion. It's of Obama's team. It's much more than fundraising and eliminating possible conflict of interest with the wealthy individuals. It's gaining engagement. As I've said, Kickstarter, a very big platform. It's only the tip of the iceberg of crowdfunding, but it's very well known. More than 5,000 entrepreneurs at parallel currently are seeking to raise funds from the crowd through Kickstarter. This is one of the most successful examples. A young guy from the Silicon Valley wanted to invent a watch that connects to his mobile phone and shows who calls him and whether he gets an SMS while he's cycling, because until then he had to stop on his way to work and look at the phone. Almost 70,000 people pre-purchased this watch. It created a community 9 months before it was shipped. 5,000 people bought the right with the SDK, Software Development Kit. So there were dozens of applications before the watch was shipped, and they had a followed sequential investment and are doing quite well. Remember, it's in a very, very competitive arena where the big players are trying to invent wearable computing or other forms of mobile phones. And here, a young guy raises $10 million. The team does not offer any shares for it, so it's not a delusion. They create a community, they validate the market, and they fund the first step. An Israeli campaign, which is just about to finish in 4 days, it's a screenshot from yesterday. They raised more than almost $2.5 million for a handheld stethoscope. You know, there are big machineries that can tell you what are the calories, sugar, what are the ingredients of every material. So they are doing it with a handheld device connected to the iPhone, and they want to be Wikipedia of things. So they have now almost soon they'll have dozens of thousands, 12,000 people investing, pre-buying, thinking about this innovation until it will be shipped, suggesting ideas, picking their color, telling their friends, maybe giving them best practices from their experience. Imagine if you had an advisory board of 10,000 people. It's not hard, it's not very easy to manage, but maybe more than a $10 or $100 investment, you could get a tip for a client or a supplier that could be extremely valuable. Lending Club is one of the is the biggest peer-to-peer platforms. It's based in the US. Google invested lately almost $100 million in this company. They are giving loans from one to each other via this platform. And it's not being done only for consumer loans. A funding circle from a country near you is funding SMEs. We can lend $100 to the local grocery store or to a startup to start build their business. And the British government, this is the second year, they allocated £50 million for specific SMEs through funding circle. So it's getting bigger and bigger. And last, Seeders it's also a UK-based platform. By the way, all the slide deck will be available for you to usage. We're on the crowd and openness spirits, or everything will be shared, and you could do it whatever you'd like. Seeders, that's a UK-based platform, and the SMEs are fundraising from the public in return for shares, so they can be a part. In Kickstarter, if a company makes an M&A or an exit, people are not a part of this success. But here, you could buy a share. Not only invest or buy something in advance, but be a part of the journey of this company. So you have a few examples, and there are much, much more. These are the 4 domains. The market has evolved very fast. When we wrote the book back in 2010, it was a very, very small market and unheard of. Today it's reaching $8 billion yearly. It's only the tip of the iceberg. I'm certain that in this space it will grow dramatically. Not everything is on the bright side. We have many challenges as an industry. How we can cope with fraud and failures. How we can cope with the scalability. Currently, we can't fund a new drug by crowdfunding. But I think we can do much more. And we are coping with these challenges, and this is for the, maybe I'd love to chat about it later. So, I think that crowdfunding is the new like. Like is very passive. We are racing as corporates, whether for a non-profit or even public, for likes. I think that like is very, very passive. Crowdfunding is the new like. And I think that companies that will understand it, and organizations that will understand it that it's not only a funding mechanism. It's a social trend. And if we could engage, truly engage people that are funding us, we could do much more than that. So, I'm coming back to my question about the biggest challenges. And I guess that you're thinking, okay, this is a very nice trend. It helps entrepreneurs. It's mainly an maybe it's an entrepreneurial finance mechanism, maybe it's a social trend, but what does it relate to open innovation? So I'll try to humbly answer. Nowadays, I think that the next revolution of crowdfunding is where corporates meets crowdfunding. It's not only for entrepreneurs. If we could leverage the power of the basic mechanisms and notions of crowdfunding, we can, as an organization, engage our audience, target audience, whether it's a different part of the helix, and we can truly offer incentives, and we could make it work. So it's not only ideation, it's not only voting, it's not only getting suggestions, it's also funding it and making it happen, and it also creates engagement at a higher level. Imagine that we are a municipality and we want to have new ideas. So think of a new way to engage our citizens. We're not only getting ideas from the new infrastructure that they want to, and we are not only getting votes on it and suggestions. Now we are offering them a way to vote with micro-investment. And we're letting them a way to participate into these actions. And now public budgets are going where the crowd really wants to, and not only where a few experts are deciding where to allocate this budget. IBM has recently finished a very successful pilot. Imagine a Kickstarter within your corporate. Discover and fund other IBMers projects. I'll tell you a story from a case that I'm highly familiar with. I work closely to a high-tech organization in Israel. They have approximately 5,000 R&D people, and they had until now many open innovation competitions. And we came up with the idea, and it's very young people involved. Let's take Kickstarter, where all the young people are very familiar with, it's trendish, and take it into the organization. And now if you want to have a new idea, you upload a pitch to the internal Kickstarter. And the employees are getting virtual currency, and now they are not only voting for their friends, they are voting with a limited currency that possibly could make them a financial return. And some of them not only suggesting ideas, voting, giving them the like with the currency, but also saying, I'm able to invest 10 hours, whether I'm a software, hardware designer, into this project. So we are creating projects within internal Kickstarter, and IBM has done it on a larger scale. It's very successful. There's a case study that was already published, and I warmly suggest to read about it. General Electric are sourcing new ideas via a quite small, equity-based platform. We were speaking last year about, for example, corporate venture capital as a way for open innovation. So equity-based crowdfunding could be also a great source for innovation. Municipalities are working through such platforms to create engagement with citizens. Imagine that if we want a new infrastructure, whether it's a new playground, let's say for our kids, we can protest, we can vote 1 and 4 or 5 years for a new mayor, but now, if it's important enough, we can invest $10 into this new playground, that if you will encourage our neighborhood to do so, we'll have it. And some of the municipalities are co-matching this investment. So, to end we started to speak about Tachlis, and I suggest a new slogan, from openness to Tachlis, and I think it could be valuable. How it can be done, Tim Wright, my co-author from lovely Scotland, is here. We offered some of our thoughts on the bigger scale of how we can find crowd assets in the organization. It's appearing in the yearbook. Sorry, and with that, I leave you with the thought: crowd empower your open innovation venture. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Dan, for a great talk. I think the democratization actually of funding is really important, but this engagement angle that you've brought in, I think, is really interesting. We are running slightly behind time, so we're going to see a short video from Robert Madeline, who's the Director General of DG Connect, and we want to acknowledge DG Connect and Robert's personal sort of engagement and involvement. Then we're going to close this session with a short conversation with Cal Ryan, one of the founders of Ryanair. So if we can run the Robert Madeline video, and then we'll close with a short conversation with Cal.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you. You are in the right forum.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm extremely pleased that I have been offered a virtual platform for the Open Innovation Conference in Dublin, and I'm only sorry I'm not physically with you today. But I am definitely with you in spirit, and I want to talk a little bit, not just about open innovation, where everybody in the room knows better than me, but also what's the framework in Europe with which we're dealing in the transition period that we're now entering. As you all know, Europe has come out of an unusually bruising political campaign in the elections for the European Parliament. Parties which are politely termed populist have increased their share, and we rethink, in the light of this experience, what is the meaning of Europe and what is the role that Europe can play in order to be a more successful and trusted partner for the citizens who did not vote for Euro-friendly parties in the numbers we might hope for. That's the political challenge. The economic challenge is recovering faster and holding our own as a rich and innovative slice of an open global internet economy. Let me start with the second challenge. Europe is not badly placed in the global tech futures game. The World Economic Forum sees 5 out of the top 10 innovative and competitive economies in Europe. Our tragedy is that those 5 are all in the north. They don't include my own country, they don't include this country, Ireland, and they don't include the huge swathes of southern and eastern opportunity, skills, endeavour that we have within the European Union, but which have yet to put themselves on the global innovation map. So in Europe, we face a challenging future at the global level, and we're only fighting with half our strength today. The challenge I would like to put for open innovation is, can it be open to those who are not today the most innovative or the most competitive parts of a society? I think if open innovation can show itself to be not just a solution provider, but a solution provider with solidarity, with a capacity to close the digital divide, that could become a big game changer in the next 5-year mandate of the European Commission. So that's the challenge. If I then look at the ways to deal with it, I would come back to the politics. The 20, 30, 40% of European citizens who feel excluded from any narrative of a digital future are inevitably those who are less likely to think this matters to them and less likely to think, therefore, that it matters whether or not European endeavour and open innovation can help them. So the big political as well as economic challenge that we face is to overcome this digital divide. If we could, in 5 years, significantly reduce, if not eliminate, the exclusion in our societies, if we could bring digital skills up to a level where everyone is regularly on the internet, where we are all comfortable with digital means of fulfilling our civic duties, like paying our taxes or renewing our car license, as well as using online skills to drive our health, to help us reduce our domestic heating bills, to fight crime, and to connect with our friends and family around the country and around the world. If we can achieve that sort of change, I think many other things will follow more smoothly than they are today. And I think that therefore everyone in this room, all the corporates, all the civil society, all the political leaders, the challenge for open innovation there is not just to be a solidarity machine, but for the individuals and for the group actors that you represent to be part of the European endeavour to improve skills. The Grand Coalition that President Barroso and Neelie Kroes launched in Davos this year is not going to be a 12-month one-off experiment. It's the beginning of a networked solution for coding in primary schools, for STEM education and computer science in secondary schools, for foundation courses in computer science in universities, as well as for civic cooperation of the sort that open innovation can make possible. This Grand Coalition needs the support of every corporate citizen of every community across Europe if it is to be the network of solutions to this problem. It's not going to be a question of Brussels saying this is the answer, but I do believe very strongly as a personal conviction and as a professional proposition that if we do these things together, we will learn faster and deliver more effectively for our taxpayers' money than we otherwise can. So those are the twin challenges I see. On the one hand, bringing people on board because people deserve to have digital opportunity, and on the other, bringing people on board because without them, we're going to fail to harvest the digital opportunities for Europe in the global marketplace. All the rest you know. Digital is everywhere, data is going to drive every sector, frontiers between businesses are falling, business models are there for the invention. The future can be wonderful, but only if we balance it on these two pillars. So I hope that the Open Innovation Conference will not just be about what the world can do for open innovation, but what you can do for this challenge in Europe. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Robert. By the way, we are sort of live on a webcast, excellent quality, openinnovation2-o.eu if anybody wants to follow it. I do want to welcome the people that are watching this on the webcast. I think that was actually quite sobering, but quite inspiring, Dan. I think it actually was quite a bit of tactless. So our last, innovation is not rigid, it's fluid, and we have actually innovated our program. The opportunity came up yesterday to actually have one of our innovation luminaries, Kel Ryan, one of the co-founders of Ryanair, join us. So we have the opportunity for one or two questions with Kel. So please welcome Kel Ryan, co-founder of Ryanair, to the stage. So Kel, maybe if I could start, and congratulations. We're humbled here in Ireland. We're really blessed that actually you and your brother and sort of collective sons have done so much, for European entrepreneurship. One of the areas we've been talking about is the idea of shared value, that companies aren't just about profit, but they're also about doing good. And I was intrigued when we talked yesterday, telling about the original motivations of Tony Ryan around the carrier, tourism around creating jobs. Maybe you could share that with us, because the results have been phenomenal. So perhaps you could talk to us about that.
Good morning. Is this working?
Yes.
Yeah, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I've spoken too much. My voice is getting a bit hoarse. But my brother did found Ryanair. And as Martin said, he always kept things simple, which I think is a very important message to take in any kind of a business, and even when it comes to innovation. But he founded Ryanair on three basic goals. And one was to create competition basically between Ireland and England, which at that time was really controlled by Aer Lingus and British Airways. He wanted to create a second force carrier with low fares that people could afford to fly. And the other thing that always bugged him was immigration, the people that left Ireland going back as far as the famine, up to the 50s and in the 60s. So he wanted to encourage tourism, cheap flights so these people could get back to Ireland. And tourism obviously being one of the biggest industries in Ireland. And the third goal was to create jobs and opportunities to advance. And even though it's 28 years ago, those goals have been realised over and over and over again. And just maybe to put it all in context, when I joined, there was 35 people working for the company, and we carried 5,000 passengers in that year. Today, currently, Ryanair has 9,500 people, highly professionals, well paid, and this year the company will carry 84 million passengers. So I think it's a remarkable achievement.
I think it's amazing, actually, when you just look at the share price performance, the volume of passengers, the market cap versus BA and Lufthansa, established for many, many decades. It's remarkable. And I think this idea of these three, mutually overlapping goals, and I think that's part of the secret of the success. Are there any key lessons from an innovation standpoint? Because I know the story is told from sort of the first aircraft at Waterford, and Michael O'Leary looking at the Southwest model in the US and the adoption here. Business model innovation has been at the core of the success. Any comments or thoughts on that?
Well, I think when we started at the beginning, we were just like any other airline. We were carrying a lot of passengers, and like many other airlines, we were losing lots of money. At that stage, my brother was the only shareholder, and the company had lost somewhere in the region of £20 million in about 5 years. So something had to happen. So in the end, Tony knew a guy called Herb Kelleher, and if there's any people here from the States, they'll know of Herb Kelleher and Southwest Airlines. So they went out to look at them to see what their operation was. And they were the most successful low-cost airline probably in the world. So we took that back to Ireland and started. But it was really the beginning of a huge innovation. It had never been done before. People were going to have to pay for their tea and coffee, not get a seat allocated to them and so on. But it worked. Despite the critics, despite the cynics, they said it was only last 6 months. And then when it lasted 6 months, they said, well, it only lasts a year. It's now year 28. And I think that was, to get that message out, that was the most important thing. And maybe the next biggest innovation was getting to one type of airplane, the Boeing 737, of which there are 300, and probably the internet. It couldn't be where we are today without the internet. There's no way you could take those kind of bookings. And incidentally enough, when we were going down the road of the internet, we didn't know much about it except it was out there. So we called these guys over from London to give us a price, and the price was crazy. We couldn't afford that. So in the end, we got 4 A-level students. We gave them a couple of free tickets. We gave them £10,000 to share out, and they developed the website that you see today. And in fact, 2 of them stayed on in our IT section. And I think that was certainly a great innovation. That was certainly looking very differently at how you do things.
It's actually a brilliant example of frugal innovation, and actually when you look at the Ryanair story, even the choice of the seats on the Boeing planes, they're a minimalist design, they're cheaper, but they're much lower maintenance. They don't have the pockets for rubbish. It's amazing. Okay, we have time for 1 or 2 questions, either to Cal or to Richard or Dan before we break. Anybody like to ask a question? Yes.
Hi, Walter Weigel from Siemens. Just we heard about crowdfunding. 28 years ago, there was no crowdfunding. How did you fund all the necessary money?
The company was set up with a capital of about £50,000 by my brother. He had an aircraft leasing company, which was doing very well at the time, and he was the only backer. He was the funder. He was the only shareholder, and he was there to continue that until his own company ran into problems, and he could no longer support the company. And the story is that when he got Michael O'Leary, our shy and retiring chief executive, and he worked with Tony on his other investments, and Tony said, what are we going to do? And even Michael admitted, no, he said, Tony, shut it down, it'll never make money. And Tony then had a different view, and they went to Southwest Airlines. And in those 25 years, I think Michael O'Leary is probably the best chief executive, airline chief executive in the world. And he's carried those goals forward to where the company is today.
Oh, fantastic. Time for one last question. Does anybody have a question?
There are no free flights.
Okay, yes.
I'm just wondering, it was a frugal model. You seem to be continuing to innovate. There's a new, fresh, look after the customer type theme is emerging. Sorry, just the question is, to date has been cheap and nasty, we'll sell on price, that's it. But there seems to be a new innovation arriving at Ryanair saying we're actually going to reach out to the customer with Michael O'Leary's big smile and all that kind of thing. Could you tell us a little bit about what's driving that change?
Well, Michael hasn't had plastic surgery, okay? But I think in lots of ways the company has grown up. It's 28 years on. And I still, despite all the criticism, I think they do remark on what passengers are saying. And some of the things that we were doing to eliminate them didn't really cost us money. And I think that's what they're doing now. And they're going to try to be more friendly and more cuddly, as Michael says, to the passengers. And also to go after the business traffic, which accounts for about 20% of the business. But they want to develop that more and add in the stuff that business people want. But I think it is a lesson that you have to listen to your customers. And as Michael famously once said, this company said is going to do all right. We're going to continue to grow, provided we don't believe our own bullshit. I think that's an important lesson, that you do listen and you try to accommodate them. I mean, the company is growing. It'll be carrying over 100 million passengers in different destinations over the next couple of years, a whole different group of demographics. So I think you have to have, reassuring with people. And one of the things that Ireland is known for is this nice and friendly nature, and I think that's what he's trying to nurture.
Great, Cal. Well, thank you very much. And I'm certainly, as an Irish person, really proud of what Ryanair has done, because not only have you created a very successful business, but you fundamentally restructured actually the airline industry in Europe. A lot more people can travel that weren't able to travel, and the other airlines have innovated to try and compete with you. One simple example actually for ICT 2013 in Vilnius this year, we traveled with many. The plane was full of Irish researchers going to that event, and without you, probably only a handful would have made that event, but the plane was full. So thanks very much, Cal. Thanks to Dan and Richard for their contributions. We very much appreciated Robert Madeline and Henry Chesborough's contribution. We now have a networking break. We are going to try and stay on time, so we've got about 20 minutes. There is a fantastic session coming up after this. We have Bree McRae, who's going to talk about the Entrepreneurial University. We have Julie Sunneman, who's recently appointed Head of Enterprise Ireland, is going to talk about Entrepreneurial Ireland. Antti Peltomäki, Deputy Director General of DG Enterprise and Industry, will be talking about Open Innovation 2.0 paradigm. And finally, we have Stefan Scheppers talking about European innovation ecosystems and policy. And Peter Finnegan from Dublin City will be moderating that. So please put your hands together for our fantastic speakers and panelists, and we'll see you after the break.